Coming to you today with another portfolio update. We want to let you know what we're working on. Sitting here late June, early July of 2021, and we're seeing global growth. So in the US and across the oceans, we're seeing rebounds, right? If you look at where earnings are coming in compared to a year ago they were stunted by COVID, so companies are posting much better numbers. Consumer confidence has continued to increase, and there's just an overall excitement and an increase in economic activity. At the same time, the governments have printed a lot of money in the last year. As they were printing, it became apparent that at some point this had to stop or slow down, or we may see some inflation. Well, guess what? We're starting to get inflationary readings. So as we sit here putting together our investment ideas, we've got a global growth situation on one hand, but we're starting to see some inflationary issues on the other. So what could work well in that scenario? We set up a good old-fashioned Venn diagram. On one side, luxury goods. If the global growth is going to continue, then luxury goods should do well. On the other, what items do well over time and act as a good protection against inflation? So on the luxury side of our Venn diagram, what are things that people buy in a global growth scenario? Exotic cars, boats, planes, fine jewelry. All these things are purchased in greater numbers when the economy is good. Now, will they go up in value over time? Oftentimes many of these things go down. At the same time, let's look at our long-term, just what gets more expensive over time. How about your grocery bill? Filling up your gas tank. Some of the basic inputs to our economy and our standard of living tend to get more expensive. As we filled in both of these Venn diagram pieces here, wine sat right at the intersection. Let's talk about wine for a moment. Of all the different things we've invested in, some things can be pretty boring. Wine is not one of those, right? This is an easy thing to talk about. So it's grown at beautiful vineyards, beautiful estates. It's put into barrels where it ages, typically becomes more valuable, and then it's bottled and sold. We generated a list of all publicly traded wine companies, and we then sorted them by some characteristics that we feel would help us sort between which ones we wanted to invest in and which ones we'd be better off passing on. I want to dig into one of the metrics a bit more and share it with you. So let me tell you, when you start looking up publicly traded wine companies, they all have beautiful pictures on their website. All of them have wonderful looking wine estates and vineyards, great landscapes. So on the surface, they all look great. But as we dove in, there was a vast difference between the way these companies looked on their financial statements. So one portfolio of wineries that we looked at had been financed with 77% debt. So they had borrowed debt up to 77% of the value of their assets. On the more conservative side, we saw a winery that was financed only 33% by debt. The remainder is financed through equity. So if you think about that, two companies that are in the same type of business, but one had taken on substantially more debt as a percentage of their overall asset base. Has a lot more risk if things don't go well. So when we invest in wineries or public wine companies, let's think about what type of revenue we get. First, we obviously get wine sales to grocers, wholesalers, wine stores. In addition, there's a lot of revenue and profit generated at the venues themselves. Wine tasting fees, paired dinners. How about celebrations delayed by COVID? What about all the weddings? If we looked at 2020, and as we dug into the financials, this is the story that we saw unfolding. In 2020, there was not nearly as much revenue generated from venue rental fees. Well, that's because there weren't couples spending quite a bit of money on a weekly basis to rent these gorgeous wineries. That's coming back into play here, and that's going to be another boost to our investment thesis. So we like a lot of things about this space. It's all lining up well, and that's why we're entering it now.